Game Master Tips, number 7, campaign building with Patrick Kanouse. Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, not much.
Long time no see.
Yeah, not long at all.
Yeah,
Yes.
anybody watching? Yeah, we just were running live with the Cyberpunk Uncensored episode featuring Patrick, all about his background on gaming and him and his brother. As you see the logo up there, the two brothers gaming. If you want to learn about him, his background, his brother, his company, upcoming streams, him doing conventions, just a lot of cool shit. Everything Patrick, check out that episode of Cyberpunk Uncensored. It's there on the Cyberpunk Uncensored YouTube channel. We also stream to like Twitch and Twitter and a bunch of sites. But yeah, if you're into that, go check that out. This episode of Game Master Tips is all about Patrick's process of campaign building. So let's get right into that. That's kind of what I like to do on these, is just get right to the meat and bones of what's up. So let's start here. You're an old school GM. You've been doing it a long time. You know the ins and outs of multiple systems, because you don't only play Cyberpunk. And like I said, anybody watching, you can learn more about him on that episode. But just for like a quick Cliff's Notes, you have played multiple systems. But just for the sake of this conversation and the fact that this is very cyberpunk centric, let's focus on that when it comes to anything specific that might involve that. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, let's talk about your process of campaign building. First off, um, do you typically run pre-made games, modules, or whatever?
Uh, no, I've run in my entire GMing career one pre-made module. I create everything on my own outside of that.
It's
So I
it
use pre-made modules for all sorts of inspiration and
exactly,
tips.
yeah. It's funny because like all the good GMs I talk to, and I do these campaign building videos for Game Master Tips, because I think it's important to see everybody's process. Even if some are similar, sometimes people have different angles and ways they do it. But one thing I always see that's similar with like really good GMs is they don't always, and I don't want to say always, but they don't typically run other pre-made games or modules, but they all love them and like read them and pull, oh, okay, I see how they did that. I'm gonna do something similar when I create my own. And like, it's funny, but like there's always like that certain, like, there's good GMs and they'll run it and they'll do a great job, but then once you get to that point, you start creating your own. And GMs that I see typically create their own, they always use those modules as like a resource versus an actually to game with them.
Yeah.
But that's awesome that you said you said that too, man. And that's a lot of reflection on your skill level and the way you GM, and I love that. So let's get into creating your own then. How do you like to typically start creating your own campaign? And this, for the sake of conversation, let's take it all the way to like the beginning of, like, you get your players. And I imagine if you're not having like pre-made, pre-gens or whatever, they're rolling, they're creating their characters. Once you see, okay, this person made an exec, this is a cop, this is a solo, this is a fixer, you see who your players are. Where do you go from there? Do you like to have your session 0 and start there, or how do you kind of create your campaign or get into it?
Yeah. So usually I have an idea of a campaign that I want to run. And so I have a session 0, and they roll the characters up. And most of the time I'm pretty open with it. Some cases for, in the upcoming campaign we're going to do, I said, you need to be private investigators. I don't care how you get there. I don't care if you start out as a fixer or you start out as a lawman, which makes sense, but don't have to start there. You have to end up being a PI. So you have to kind of get into that space. And usually what I have in mind is an overarching story that I want to, I know where I want them to kind of start. I know what I want the main theme to be, and I know where I want them to end. And as they create the characters, that presents opportunities to tie their character backgrounds, or if they have a lover who now hates them. Guess what? That's coming into the story. Or
Yeah.
you have a lover who you're still really attached to. Well, guess what? He or she may be in jeopardy because I'm gonna use that as a hook in a way to kind of get you in. But so so I use that really to create episodes that are outside of the main arc that I want to do, but and allow kind of a focus on the character and that kind of stuff. But what I really, really want to get out of character creation from them are the moral or narrative choices that I can force them to make. That's what I like to do. I like to put the characters and give them a sort of hard decision that they're going to have to make, and maybe not every single episode that they play, but, kind of leading up to it. And, because I feel that reveals about the character, right? If it's just going to be, normal, then, it's hard to give them that kind of choice. So that's what I like to do with that. And I like, in particular in cyberpunk, to also give them a lot of choice around what their home it looks like, where their place of work looks like. Allow them to imbue that with like what they think their character would have in terms of, oh yeah, here's my office, is my private investigator's office, and it's messy, it's neat, it has an entertainment screen that's always on, cranking out or never on, and that kind of stuff, and kind of allow them to build that.
Yeah, allow them to kind of bring the world to life. That's really cool.
Yes.
And going back on what you just said a minute, don't lose track of where you're going, because I don't want to interrupt or pull you off of focus. But going back on what you said, I think a good tip there, which is pretty cool, is like, using your session 0 to find the key points within life path. And I think every good GM, knows to do this, but like it's a great thing to bring up, is like finding those key points in the life path that even if you have your set sort of arc campaign that you've constructed, your starting point, the main theme and vibe, the end result or point you're hoping they get to, but once you have that, it's kind of important to look at the life path to not just, sprinkle in something that might, make them more attached or feel more immersed in what's happening. But I think the word motivation, to have it as, as a motivation for their character, like you said, if it's someone that they're still attached to in their love life and now they're in turmoil or they need help, and like, hell, what more motivation do you need, So I think that's a great tip, is like, and it's been mentioned before, it should be mentioned 100 times, because it is that important. Like, when kind of constructing your campaign, you do have your thoughts as a GM in mind first, that initial arc in your story. But it's important to, right off the fucking bat, incorporate some player stuff so they're motivated to be part of that story that you just created. So I think that's cool that you brought that up, and I think it's very important. But go on where you would take it from there, yeah.
Yeah, well, just a tad bit of add-on to that, because I think you're absolutely right. And I always come back to, something that Mike Pondsmith has always said, like, Johnny Silverhand doesn't, attack Arasaka because he's upset about Arasaka. He attacks Arasaka because they've taken his girlfriend.
Exactly.
And that's his motivation. It's in cyberpunk, it's about you, the character, against the world or whatever it is, and that personal motivation has to kind of drive that. Yeah. So basically what I end up doing, so I'm a GM who likes to have a rich background already kind of set up, which of course cyberpunk does, but I create my own corporations a lot of the times, because sometimes I like Arasaka, I like Militech, I like all of it, but sometimes I actually like to not be part of that canon. So they'll still be there, but I have Doragon Shuri or Tenon Enterprises or something be sort of the corporation that I like them to go up against, and so I flesh out those characters. It
allows you some flexibility. There's a tip right there too. Like GMs, if you're feeling too locked in with the lore of your game and you feel it's limiting some of the campaign options that you have in mind to kind of throw at your players, or like your arc, and it's just, you can be completely flexible by creating some of your own lore within it, and it's complete, especially in cyberpunk. It's like not just welcomed, it's encouraged, like you can read that in the books. Like one of the prime examples I love saying is like in gangs, when it describes gangs, it's like, but this is just like the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more gangs out there, and feel free to make up your own and add in more, because there's gonna be, but they do that with
Yeah.
everything. But I think that's an important thing to make note of is like, because I'm the same way. I'll use some of the lore and some of the main names and things. I love the new Neocorps that I've incorporated into the new games because I got that direct from the Artal Sorian blog, and like as much as I can get new lore and incorporate, cool. But I'm definitely a big fan of creating your own as well, like making your own gangs, your own pirates, your own companies, your own nomads, and like it just gives you a little more flexibility if you're feeling kind of limited within certain lore, so you can fit it into whatever campaign you come up with. But that's a great point. But go on.
Yeah, yeah. So I like to have a really rich background because that way it allows me as a GM to be able to respond very quickly. If I understand the background and the story that I'm setting, then when the players do something unexpected, because guess what,
They
they
always
are.
do. They
Yeah,
always do. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It allows me to respond, I think, very naturally. And um, one of the things that when I've taken feedback about how I GM from people, the thing I've always managed like the best is when they say, "Well, yeah, that you pulled out this scenario and used that bit of detail." I'm like, "Yeah, that's something I made up on the fly
Oh yeah.
because you did something, I created it, but it felt really natural, and I feel that's because I understand the background and stuff. And it's not that I go and create like a novel of background, but I really do try to flesh it out in terms of my thinking. I have a few sentences on these corporations and major NPCs and that kind of stuff. And then I usually create each episode. I start off where they're at. I have a few basically bullet points that says, here's the main kind of scenes that I'm kind of expecting throughout this and where they're going to end up, and I kind of make sure all those kind of are prepped to some degree or another. I do this knowing that they may not go that path, and I'm okay with that. So it in some ways I feel a GM should make sure that they prep as much as they want to. If you're going to prep a lot and get upset that somebody doesn't go down that path and use that map, then don't jump in there. Don't create it. Like if that's too much, then
Hey, there's a tip right there too. Like that's important to kind of bring up because like I'm definitely like that. Like I'll write out the details, but I keep it kind of vague. I'll keep short bullet points. Some of the dialogue I may run off on a little and put maybe too much info, and then later I'll look. Let me trim this back a little. But I typically, like you just said, I keep it so I can be flexible. So I think the tip to get across here to GMs is don't go into so much depth about your campaign and the different NPCs and corps and details and all the components, uh, and then get upset if you don't get into all those things because like you gotta let the players play the game. They're the leads or whatever, and you gotta be flexible. So like, don't get mad if they're not touching base on everything that you took the time to write out. And I think the
yeah,
way to avoid that is don't take the time to write it out so much to where it's like so fucking detailed that there's no way around it either, because then you're gonna make the players feel like they're railroaded into this like one-way street campaign where they just can't fucking get into the open world, and like that sucks. So I think that's a good point that you made is like, make all your points, but few sentences about each thing and get your details, but be ready to work with what the players do because they always do unexpected stuff.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes when they do that unexpected stuff, that adds completely new threads that I want to take up and run with.
Yeah.
Like if they go and search an item, like, hey, I want to go and search this, the back of this shop that is now closed. And you're like, I didn't plan for them to do this, and they're back there searching for it, and so you kind of just create some stuff. Or you're like, oh yeah, there's a tablet in there and and some eddies or what have you, and you kind of put stuff in there and they want to say, well, what's in this tablet, because a lot of times they're thinking it's more important than
Right.
you're kind of like toss off like I put some stuff there, and I say, oh well, okay, yeah, so you're able to crack it, and okay, there's somebody there saying that they need help, that they're underwater, they need money, and all of a sudden you've got another story
Yep.
that that you can follow on and hinge on, and it all just came off the fly because you were ready to improv it, and kind of go with the flow. And again, I think that's having a for me, it's understanding what the background is well enough to know that here's what I can do with that kind of situation when it comes up, and
Yeah.
I'm willing to go there. I'm willing to
Exactly. I think
let them define.
it's a certain point, like, to be a good GM, and I think the tip within that, I think, is like, not being scared of the curveballs that the players are going to throw at you. Learn to use them. Don't avoid them and be scared and be like, oh shit, that's different than I was thinking. Like you just said, they might say like, you know what, I want to search this, and you're like, well, I wasn't expecting, I didn't really write anything down that's in that desk, but let me just, yeah, you find some paperwork in there, and you're not making sense of it. Maybe you don't have anything on mind right then. Like if you're not a quick thinker, you can always say like, but it's encrypted or it's this or that. And then it gives you a little time. And then you're like, fuck, let me make that something cool. Because I didn't even think about doing that. Now they threw that in there and I want that to be its own separate tangent. And that could lead to some sessions on the side. Then they get back to this mission. It just adds depth and more time to a campaign and a world. It makes it better. But I think that's great. That's really cool. Is like, embrace those curveballs,
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think it comes back to, it's that collaborative storytelling. To me, that's what RPGs are. Yeah, I have an overarching story, but it's really us creating the story together and using the mechanics of the dice to sort of deal with randomness and chance. That's a part of it. So, but yeah, and then that's essentially how I prepare every session. I like, with Roll20, I do like to prepare maps, and I've kind of fallen in love with Fog of War, and some of those techniques on Roll20. So I spend far more time. I spend far more time with maps now than I did like in the 80s or 90s with stuff where I drew up stuff on a piece of paper. But again, I like it, and I feel that it, in some ways, it adds an effect of, especially like Fog of War, if they want to go around a map and sort of take a look at stuff. It kind of keeps stuff hidden and kind of adds a mystery to it.
Yeah, and just to explain it, anybody watching the video that's not familiar with Roll20, it's an online digital platform. Go to roll20.net, ROLL, the number 20.net, where you'll see it's basically you can host your games there, your role playing games, character sheets, digital dice, all that good stuff. But there's this tool there called Fog of War. So when you put in a map, you can actually cover certain parts of the map that only the GM will see. To everybody else, it appears blacked out. So as you go, you can reveal different parts as they, dungeon crawl your map or whatever, so to speak. But yeah, I love Fog of War. I just in the past handful of sessions got into it. Prior to that, when I first started streaming, I was using sections and stuff, and then I was like, okay, let me take time to learn it. And then once I got into it, I was like, oh my God, I learned it within minutes. I was like, why was I waiting? What the hell? This is awesome.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, but so I actually, like in my cyberpunk campaign, I have a bunch of maps up. Some that I've designated, okay, that's their office. So I have their office map written up. I know what maps I'm going to start using for, that particular episode. But if I have some just plain street maps, and if they all of a sudden encounter, one of my poser gangs, the Bruce Lees,
nice.
they might encounter them, and I might need a sudden street map, and it's just like, oh, there you go, there's a street map for you.
There's another,
plot the tokens.
Yeah, that's another great tip too, because I do that too. Is like in my campaigns, I'll drop like a generic building blueprint, that I can make, that can represent like a shop or a warehouse or apartment building if I want. It has like the rooms, and I'll be like, yeah, in this room there's a bed, and now it's in that room there's an engine thing. Like it can translate. And then I have like a couple street ones too. And I think that's a great tip too if you're a GM. And this is whether you're playing in person, physical, using maps, or you're using a site like Roll20 to do digital maps. It's always good to have a couple generic backups. And that kind of, I don't know, it's like a safety net for you. Maybe makes you feel a little comfortable to kind of catch those curveballs that the players might throw at you. So like if they're going to engage in combat out front of the shop that you just wanted them to go inside because you have that map ready. You can quickly pull up a street map and be like, okay, you want to get into it outside? I have something for that, So it might be kind of cool. And there's a tip, have a couple little backup maps or some generic things that you might be able to just kind of throw in quickly if you have a little curveball thrown at you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so one of the, and then one of the other things, and I think so I'll plug Legend Keeper. Legend Keeper is an app, browser app that I use, made by a guy who was trying to figure out how to um, uh, organize his campaigns and keep track of information. And basically, it's a map. It starts out with a map, and you can put like pins in it, and those pins can represent sites that people have gone to. And you can click a pin and go in deeper. It takes you to a more detailed map. It has like a little wiki, and they all have like tags and that kind of stuff. So it's a place where I go to keep track of everything. So there's the NPC that they ran into. So I take notes in my cyberpunk journal for what's going on. But I do that because my typing's really loud and I don't want to interrupt the game. So I write, and then I take it to that, and I keep track of, that's where they encountered, Smoke here, and they encountered Jocasta here. And this is the name of this place. And, and a lot of times you do have to create names of people, NPCs, and shops and stuff on the fly. So I keep track of that, and I say, okay, yeah, this is the gun shop that they went to, and here's the nightclub that they went to, or something like that.
So. And I think that's an important tip too, is like, kind of keeping track of what players do. And I do the same thing. I can show you some examples. Like, this is from last week's game. I'll do all my printouts of my campaigns, and then I'll make my pencil notes of things that they're doing, or like files that they found, or this and that. And then that way I can go back into the next session that I'm typing up or organizing, and I can make sure I keep track of all these things. Because like you said, it's important that if a player wants to go back to somewhere that they were, or they want to, let me call up that dude I met 3 sessions ago, you're not like, oh shit, wait, what did I name that guy? What does he look like? What did I have him do? Like, keep track of some of these little key points and important things, and it'll kind of, I don't know, save your ass in the future if some of those curveballs come at you that players always throw, because not everything is going to be linear to your fucking campaign story arc that you created. You got to, like we said, keep it flexible and be ready for anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of those NPCs become major, right? They keep going back to them, or you stumble on your background in film and stuff like that. That sometimes a side character can end up
supporting heroes, they become support. Yeah, totally. And I think it's kind of fun, a little keynote, even though it's not really a Game Master tip, but I'm going to mention it because it's fun. But I kind of like when that happens, because it almost then becomes, I don't know, your GM character. Like, you bring it to life, and then it's kind of fun when they get to come back, and like you're just like, oh, cool, like I get to be that dude again, It's kind of fun. It gives you like a little play time,
Yeah. So, yeah, and then basically, I run the games and run the session, and that's how the campaign goes. If I need them to do something in particular, I don't like the railroad. I tend to be more sandboxy in terms that, if they want to go someplace, they can go and kind of do whatever.
But how do you get them back on track? I think I think you were about to go there. I'm going to interrupt and act like I asked the question. But no, totally, that's a great point to bring up, is because those curveballs fucking happen, and like when you're a good GM, you're flexible with it. But then you got to tactfully get them back on course, or you got to move those key points, or you got to do something to kind of bring it back to the main story. And how do you do that without, like you said, feeling like you're railroading them? How do you do it?
Yeah. So either I introduce new. I go and grab those motivations and pull them out and try to find a channel for a motivation that kind of gets them back on track. That's the more subtle method. The more sort of more aggressive method is I will put obstacles in front of them. Now, I don't make those obstacles impossible to overcome. I may escalate the obstacles if they're fine. I'm like, I really wanted to capture you. I really needed to get you someplace where I could, have you start out with stripping you of everything, and kind of leaving you in a room and with some bad guys. I may have to up the number of combatants who are trying to stun them or knock them out, and to get that. But so depending on kind of how they've how they've gone through a curve, I'll either try to like kind of hold them back with the motivation. I'll put somebody at risk, or I'll put you know something meaningful at them that is now in danger, and they have to address it quickly. I'll put a timeline on
Yeah. So
it.
if they, yeah, so if they fall off of the main path that you had, and they kind of lost sight of that motivation, one way to bring them back is maybe reintroduce either that or some other type of motivation, kind of help pull them back in. And I think the other kind of tip or thing that you're getting at here is like, if that's still not working, a kind of more aggressive way or direct way of doing it would be, up the ante of the scene that's in. So like, they're entering combat. You're hoping like, all right, cool, I'm gonna put these two badass fucking security guards or booster gangs here. I know they're gonna fuck them up and be able to capture them. And then all of a sudden the players come up with some crazy way of handling it. And you're like, whoa, I didn't even think of that. Okay, well, fuck, dude, they just got out of that one. Don't be scared to, the door opens and two more dudes come out and they're like, wait a minute, and they see you doing it and like, they foil the plan a little. Like, you can always do that a little bit and pull it back where it needs to be, and it won't feel too railroaded if you just do that little bit to pull it back where it needs to be, and then give them the freedom again. And hopefully you can make it work and stay on track to get to that, like you described with the arc. You've got the start, the key points, and then the end result. And ultimately you got to get them at least close to that end result, and that's a great way to kind of do it if you get a little sidetracked or a curveball thrown at you.
Yeah.
That's really cool. No, I think that's great. I think, to recap, one thing I love about it is, you really use your session 0. I think all good GMs use your session 0, grab the motivations from life path and things that you can sprinkle in or use as motivation with your campaign. For the campaign, like Patrick says, he loves, having kind of a good starting point, the key theme of the overall campaign, or, what it's going to be. Leave it open, keep that open world, make it fun to players. Don't be so locked in. And then you have your end result. Your end of the campaign, the reward, the end of the mission, or whatever they had to do. Here's the success ending to it, or whatever. But then within that, I think that the key points here are, be flexible, and then learn how to pull them back to the main point. Use your NPCs, use your motivations, and don't be scared to kind of use those curveballs as like ways to, I don't know, change it up, drop in more people to pull it where it needs to be if the motivations aren't working. And then the other thing is, don't avoid the curveballs just on a campaign or story level or mission level or job level or whatever, because you could make even more out of that. It's not just something to kind of deal with to pull back to your current campaign or story or whatever needs to happen. Look at that curveball as also a way to go on a tangent, on a side project. You can get a few sessions out of that, a cool story arc that, like you said, maybe you weren't even thinking of. You're like, you have this great idea as a GM, and then a player throws a curveball, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. I didn't even think of that. Inside, don't say that out loud during the game, But inside, you'd be like, holy shit, I didn't think of that. That's fucking genius. You know what? That's exactly what's happening, as a matter of fact. And it's going this way now. Like, lean into it. Just lean into it and just go with it. I think that's the key point there. But I think that's great, man. I think I love to keep these Game Master Tips episodes real short and sweet. I think we did a great job here keeping it under 30 minutes. And I think hopefully anybody listening, player GMs, up and coming GMs, experienced veteran GMs, you can always learn something new. You never stop learning and expanding and being creative. Hopefully anybody watching this, you got like some good tips out of this. If not one, you got many. And if you did dig it, or even if it was just entertaining, show us some love. Like the video, give it a share, subscribe to the channel. You know the drill. And definitely check out the description, look at the links and stuff, and give some support. Definitely look up Patrick Kanouse's Cyberpunk Uncensored episode and the podcast episode. It goes into depth about him and his brother and everything he has going on. There's a lot of cool shit there. You don't want to miss out on it. And yeah, any last words? Anything else that we didn't mention?
No, other than just I think enjoy, have fun. It's collaborative storytelling, and embrace it for all that it is. And everyone, you said it before. The goal is to have fun.
Yeah. Number one tip: have fun. If you're not having fun, start over. You're doing it wrong. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
All right, awesome. So, thanks so much for joining me. I love chatting with you, and we'll be doing it again. And everybody that's watching, thanks so much for checking it out. Take care, everybody.
Yep. Thank you.